wow, you sent me a ton of stuff about how businesses figure out if they're doing well. And it's kind of like, I don't know, you're trying to figure out this super complicated machine, but you're just looking at all these dials and gauges.
Yeah, definitely a lot to take in.
So I think what we should do today in this deep dive is like cut through all that noise and really try to get to the heart of what's important, how to actually read these signals.
Sound good.
Okay, cool. So we're talking business metrics and those, everybody's talking about these KPIs, those key performance indicators, right?
Right.
We want to look at why they matter, not just for huge companies, but also, like if you want to get better at anything.
Absolutely.
We're going to break down some real examples so that, anybody listening can get a better sense of what makes businesses tick.
Yeah, I think the stuff you sent over was really interesting. And one of the big things that jumped out at me was it's not enough just to have the data. All right.
Yeah.
You really have to know what it's telling you about, how healthy your product is, how your company is actually doing.
Uh-huh.
So maybe a good place to start is like, what are we even talking about when we say metrics in the business world?
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that. So from what we've got here, it seems like metrics are these quantifiable values.
Yeah.
They're the numbers that businesses use to see how well their product is doing, how their features are being used, or just how any activity is going.
Okay, makes sense.
It's kind of like when you check your car's temperature to see if the engine's overheating.
Right.
It's a number that gives you some information.
Yeah.
But, just like you wouldn't use a a barometer to measure wind speed, not every single metric a business could possibly track is actually going to help them understand if they're, actually succeeding.
You got it. And that's really important, right? Focusing on the right metrics.
Exactly.
Like you were saying, the sources really hit on that. They've got to be connected to the goals of the business.
Yeah.
And they've got to be relevant to whatever industry you're in. A software company is going to be looking at different numbers than a store.
Right. Total different ballgame.
Totally. And it's all about, really zeroing in on what actually shows if you're making progress or if you're, running into problems in your specific area.
Makes sense. And it's not just about like passively watching these numbers, is it? It's about like knowing what each metric means and then actually using them to show, whether a product's healthy, whether it's having an impact.
For sure. Yeah.
There's this great real world example in the stuff you sent. It's like something you might even get asked in a job interview if you're going for like a product role.
How interesting.
It asks, how would you measure the success of the new edit feature on Instagram?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right. It really makes you think. You can't just say, oh, well, people used it.
Yeah.
You got to point to the exact numbers that show how valuable it really is.
That's right. I like that interview question. It really shows how understanding metrics can be used in real life. You got to think beyond just whether people are using a feature.
Yeah.
You want to consider stuff like how often they're using those editing tools, what kinds of edits are popular, even how it affects other things on the platform.
Right, like whether people are sharing more, spending more time on Instagram.
Exactly. And that kind of leads us to what happens when those metrics change in a way you didn't expect, like suddenly way more people are visiting your website or way fewer people are engaging with your posts.
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting. The material talks about how important it is to have a structured way of dealing with these kinds of changes. So like if your website traffic suddenly takes a nosedive, you can't just, freak out.
You got to have a plan.
Yeah, you need a way to figure out what's going on. And it's funny, the stuff you sent mentions that a common mistake people make is giving a really disorganized answer when they're asked about this kind of situation. It's all about having a framework to figure out why a metric shifted, not just saying, oh, it went up or, oh, it went down.
Absolutely. And this whole idea of having a structured approach to understanding performance, that's where KPIs become super important.
Okay, yeah. We've been talking about metrics in general, but what makes a KPI different? And why are they so important for making, big decisions?
Yeah, so a KPI, a key performance indicator, is like a specific set of metrics. But the big difference is these are the numbers that are really tied to your main business goals. It's a quantifiable way to see how well your product or your business is doing over time, compared to the goals you're trying to hit.
So kind of like a business's vital signs.
Exactly. A perfect way to put it. The source material is spot on when it says that KPIs are essential for making big decisions.
Makes sense.
It's how leadership teams figure out if the company is on the right track to achieve its overall vision. So a business might keep track of a bunch of different metrics just to stay on top of things day to day, but the KPIs are the chosen few that really tell you how you're doing in terms of those big picture goals.
I see. And the material actually gives 5 reasons why KPIs are so important.
Right.
It says, first, they show you the overall health of your company and how successful it is.
Uh,
Second, you can analyze trends and see patterns within your industry. So are you doing better than the market, worse, or about the same?
right.
Third, they help you solve problems and find new opportunities.
Yeah.
So if a really important KPI starts going down, that's a sign that you need to investigate and figure out how to fix things.
Yeah.
And if a KPI is rapidly improving, that might mean there's an opportunity you haven't tapped into yet. Totally. And the fourth reason it highlights is that you can use KPIs to see how you're doing compared to how you did in the past. So are you growing? Are you stuck in certain areas? KPIs can give you that essential self-assessment.
Makes sense. And then, this is an interesting one, the fifth reason is that well-defined KPIs can actually really boost employee morale.
Yeah, that's interesting. How so?
Well, when teams can see how their hard work is directly helping the company achieve its goals, it gives them a sense of purpose and like they're all part of something successful.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. Seeing those numbers moving in the right direction can be motivating and something to be proud of.
For sure.
Okay, so now that we have a grasp on what metrics and KPIs are and why they matter, let's dive into some specific examples from the source material. First up is customer acquisition cost, or CAC. Sounds pretty important, right?
It is. CAC basically tells you how much you're spending on average to get a new customer.
The formula is your total sales and marketing expenses over a period of time. Divide by the number of new customers you got during that same time.
Okay, so it's about understanding how efficient you are at getting new customers. Are you spending a little or a lot to get each new person? Why is that so important?
Well, because it directly affects whether your customer acquisition strategies are going to work in the long term and, whether you're actually going to make money.
Uh-huh.
You might be getting a lot of new customers, but if it costs a ton to get each one, your whole business model might not be sustainable.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's about finding that balance.
Right. And then the material introduces another key concept, customer lifetime value, or CLV. How does that relate to CAC?
Okay, so CLV is the total amount of money you expect to make from one customer over the entire time they're doing business with you.
Okay.
The source is right on the money when it says that a high CAC is only worth it if you also have a high CLV.
Okay, I see.
It's like if you're spending tons on marketing to get customers who only buy one small thing and then disappear, you're probably losing money.
Right.
A healthy business wants its CLV to be a lot bigger than its CAC. In fact, for a lot of software businesses, a good rule of thumb is to aim for a CLV that's at least 3 times your CAC.
Wow, okay.
If you're consistently below that, it's a sign that you need to rethink how much you're spending to get customers or, maybe focus more on keeping the customers you already have and making them happy so they spend more over time.
Got it. So the goal is to get those valuable long-term customers without breaking the bank.
Exactly.
Next up, we have customer retention rate, or CRR. This seems like the flip side of CAC, right? Focusing on keeping the customers you already have.
Exactly. CRR measures the percentage of your current customers who stick around for a specific period of time.
Hmm.
It basically tells you how good you are at keeping your customer base happy and engaged.
Okay.
A low CRR should be a big warning sign for any business.
Why is that?
Well, it usually means that your product or service isn't delivering what it promises or, isn't keeping up with what your customers need.
Ouch. Yeah, nobody wants to see their customers leaving. So what does a good CRR look like? Why is it so beneficial?
A high CRR is the dream. It means you have a bunch of loyal, satisfied customers. This is huge for a few reasons.
Okay.
First, those loyal customers are more likely to keep giving you money on a regular basis.
Right.
Second, they're more likely to buy more expensive versions of your products or, try out other products or services that you offer. And maybe the most important thing is that it's usually way cheaper to keep existing customers happy than to constantly be trying to get new ones. Plus, a high retention rate often means you'll have lower support costs, and happy customers are more likely to recommend you to others, which is a huge advantage.
That makes total sense. It's like nurturing the relationships you've already built instead of always chasing after new ones.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move on to something more specific. Feature usage metric. What kind of insights does this give you?
This metric zooms in on how people are using a particular feature within your product, rather than just looking at overall use. It tracks things like how often a feature is being used, and importantly, how it's being used, which is sometimes called the mode of use.
Okay, so it's like putting one part of the user experience under a microscope.
That's a great way to put it.
Why is that level of detail valuable?
Because it gives you really specific insights into how users behave and what they prefer. Let's say you launch a brand new, super cool feature.
Right.
This metric can tell you if people are even finding it and using it, and understanding how they're using it. Are they clicking certain buttons? Are they combining it with other features in unexpected ways? That can be just as important as knowing how often they're using it.
Interesting. So you can see if your assumptions about how a feature would be used actually match up with reality.
Exactly.
Next up, we have the customer conversion rate. Conversion rate for what specifically?
Yeah, that's important to clarify because conversion can mean different things depending on what your business goals are and what action you want your users to take.
Uh-huh.
But in general, the customer conversion rate tells you what percentage of users actually do the thing you want them to do out of all the users who are interacting with your product or service.
Okay.
The source gives a common example. The number of new users who actually paid for something divided by the total number of new users. This tells you what percentage of your new users are actually becoming paying customers.
Got it. So it's about turning engagement into a specific desired outcome. But you also mentioned that conversion can refer to other actions. Can you give some more examples?
Sure. Think of conversion as someone taking a specific step you want them to take. For an online store, besides buying something, a conversion could also be someone adding an item to their wish list or signing up for emails.
Right.
For a company with a free trial, the conversion might be someone upgrading to a paid plan after the trial ends.
Makes sense.
For a company focused on getting leads, a conversion could be someone filling out a contact form or downloading a document. The key point is that a low conversion rate, no matter what action you're looking at, usually means your app, your website, or your features aren't meeting the needs or expectations of your visitors at that critical point.
Okay.
They might be looking around, but something is stopping them from taking that next step you want them to take.
So a low conversion rate is a sign that there's a problem in the user journey that needs to be fixed.
Exactly. You need to figure out what's making people leave before they do what you want them to do.
Okay.
It could be anything from a confusing design to unclear pricing,
Hmm.
or even a value proposition that just isn't resonating with your target audience.
Right, right. Okay, next up is something I think most of us have at least heard of, A/B testing. How does this tie into business metrics?
A/B testing is a really valuable way to actually improve your business metrics.
Okay, how so?
It's basically a way to compare two different versions of something. We often call them version A and version B. This could be almost anything, like the design of a button, the text on a web page, different layouts for a product page, or even different versions of a whole new feature.
Got it.
So you show these two versions to different groups of users, but the groups should be similar to each other, and then you track which version does better based on the metrics you're interested in.
So you're basically running an experiment to see what works better.
Exactly. You're showing these variations to random samples of your users, and then carefully measuring which one leads to better results, whether that's more people clicking on something, more signups, more engagement with a feature, or any other key performance indicator you want to improve.
Okay.
A/B testing takes the guesswork out of things. It lets you use real data to make decisions about your product and marketing.
Smart.
Okay.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about some financial stuff now. Monthly and annual recurring revenue, or MR.
Right.
These seem pretty straightforward.
Yeah, for businesses that use subscriptions, MRR are essential. Monthly recurring revenue, MRR, is the total amount of money you expect to receive each month from your active subscriptions. Annual recurring revenue, ARR, is just that monthly figure multiplied by 12.
No.
These metrics are crucial for keeping track of a company's financial health, predicting future revenue, and see how fast it's growing.
Right.
Having consistent recurring revenue makes a business more stable and predictable.
Makes sense. It's key for planning and showing that a subscription-based business is solid and can grow.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to something that's more about getting direct feedback. Customer feedback analysis, particularly customer interviews. This seems less about crunching numbers and more about understanding why those numbers are what they are.
You got it. And this is just as important as the numbers themselves. While metrics tell you what's happening, like your churn rate going up, customer interviews can help you understand why it's happening. By talking to your customers directly, you can learn so much more about what they need, what their pain points are, and what they really value about your product or service.
And the material talks about asking open-ended questions during these interviews.
Yes.
Why is that so important?
Because questions that start with who, what, when, where, why, or how, encourage people to share more detailed and richer insights.
Okay.
Instead of just getting a yes or no answer, you're asking them to explain their experiences. Tell the story of how they use your product, talk about their specific challenges, and what they're really looking for.
I see.
The source is right. These kinds of conversations are amazing for getting direct feedback on how usable your product is, whether people think it's valuable, and how it could grow and improve in the future.
So it's about going beyond the surface and getting at the human side of the customer experience.
Exactly.
Okay, finally, let's talk about a metric that's been getting a lot of attention lately. The Net Promoter Score, or NPS. I've seen this one around a lot. What's it all about?
NPS is a popular way to measure how satisfied customers are overall, and specifically, how likely they are to recommend you to others. It all boils down to one simple question. On a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this product or service to a friend or colleague?
Yeah, I've definitely seen that question in surveys. How do they turn those individual ratings into an overall score?
Well, based on their rating, customers are put into one of three groups. Those who give a score from 0 to 6 are called detractors. They're usually unhappy and might tell others bad things about you. People who give you a 7 or 8 are passives. They're okay with you, but not super excited. They're not really going to recommend you, but they're not going to badmouth you either. And then those who give you a 9 or a 10 are your promoters. They're your biggest fans, super loyal and enthusiastic, and very likely to recommend you to others.
Okay, so those are the three groups. How do you calculate the overall NPS from those ratings?
It's pretty simple, actually. You take the percentage of people who are promoters and subtract the percentage who are detractors. The passives aren't directly used in the calculation, but their feedback is still useful.
Okay.
The number you get is your NPS score, and it can range from -100 to +100. The source gives an example. If 30% of the people you survey are detractors and 45% are promoters, your NPS score would be 15 because 45 minus 30 equals 15.
Got it. And what's generally considered a good NPS score?
Well, the source mentions that an NPS above 0 is usually seen as good because it means you have more promoters than detractors. But what's considered a good score can really depend on your industry and even who your competitors are.
Uh-huh.
Often, the real value of NPS comes from tracking your score over time and looking for trends. Is it getting better, worse, or staying about the same?
Right, that makes sense.
Looking at it over time gives you more meaningful insights than just looking at a single score.
Definitely. So, wow, we've covered a lot in this deep dive.
Right.
We started with what business metrics are and why it's crucial to pick the right ones that match your goals.
Right.
Then we talked about KPIs and how they show how you're doing with those big strategic objectives. And finally, we went through a bunch of specific examples like customer acquisition cost, call has, customer retention rate, CRR, feature usage metrics, customer conversion rate, the importance of A/B testing, monthly and annual recurring revenue,
Yeah.
how customer feedback analysis from interviews can be so valuable, and the ever-popular Net Promoter Score, NPS.
Absolutely. I hope going through all of this has given everyone listening a much deeper understanding of not just what these terms mean, but also how important they are for businesses. They're tools that help companies measure their success, see what needs to be improved, and ultimately make better decisions based on real data.
Yeah, it's about using both the hard numbers and the human feedback to get a complete picture.
Exactly.
So as you go about your day-to-day, I want you to think about this. Think about the products and services that you use all the time. For each one, which of the metrics we talked about do you think would be most important for the companies behind those offerings?
That's a great question to consider.
How might tracking those metrics give them valuable insights or help them make smarter decisions? And maybe even think about your own work or any projects you're involved in. Are there any metrics you could track to get a better handle on your own progress and see where you could improve or do things more efficiently?
Yeah, that's a great point. Understanding these business metrics isn't just for people working in business analysis or management.
Exactly.
It could be valuable in any field. Developing a data-informed mindset and appreciating how powerful measurement can be can really help you in almost anything you do.
Absolutely. So go forth and think like a metrics master. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.